one should be trained to be, one should definitely be expected to be humble, especially when they're young or at any point in their career. And one should also expect to be confident and not leave room for, error or weakness or being unsure. So how do we balance those two things? Well, I think a lot of the intersection of where people try to balance those things results in imposter syndrome, which is you're putting yourself into situations using confidence, but then at the same time, you've been trained and you're trying to also simultaneously display humility and leave an opening for humility. And those two things, when they're not balanced or you're not sure what you're trying to do, and you've got those two forces in your body that are countering each other, imposter syndrome in some way, shape, or form is typically the result. So let's sit and process that for a minute. Does that speak to you at all?
That's an interesting point. I've never really thought of the humility point of view in terms of like, maybe that's what you're trying to battle both sides of like, no, I know what I'm talking about, but I also am trying to be humble about it, I guess. Right. And it's like a battle going on constantly.
Yeah, because you're trained to do both.
Right.
Especially when you go from execution, like you've been talking about, and trying to run a business, how do you become an assertive leader and a humble leader at the same time? Because one would expect, and one has been trained typically to think both are positive things. So how do you balance those things? And if you don't understand that you need to balance those things and have a strategy to it, you're going to end up in a lot of confusion where you're constantly putting yourself out there and pulling yourself back, and putting yourself out there and pulling yourself back, because you don't want to be seen as cocky or arrogant. And this push and pull, it's a struggle that a lot of people, I think, have to grapple with in their jobs and also in their personal lives.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point about the humility. Yeah. Trying to battle. Now, how do you battle that in real time? So in the negotiation or in the conversation or in, whatever you're in, how do you battle that in real time? And obviously it takes a lot of practice and a lot of, negotiating and a lot of like real world application. But I guess, how do you balance that in real time?
I would say by being very clear what your value is and what you are relative to that value, without getting hung up on all the things that you're not. So if you're negotiating for something, what is it that is specifically being purchased from you? Because it's not being perfect across every dimension, especially all the ones that you're comparing yourself that you find yourself lacking. But if you're very clear on what your scope is, and this is not just for selling, this could be in your job, it could be anything. You're very clear about that scope. Well, now it's not mythical. Like now you're not like fighting mythical beasts of like amazing capability across every dimension. Like, this one's so good at presenting, I'm bad at presenting. This one's so good. And you start thinking about, wait, but what is my value? What are they actually buying from me? And do I have gaps in that, honestly? And you have to have humility there. Or do I actually fit the bill there? And then these other things I could work on, but it's not all equal. But if you're not very clear, let's say an example of selling, or if you think you should get a promotion or whatever it is, if you're not very clear on what your value is and where you are relative to that, that's, I think, when you start getting really confused.